the Bhagavata Purana. This is the second part of the reading. Chitraketu. King Parikshit heard the story of Indra and Vitra from the sage Sukadeva, and Parikshit was puzzled. How could an asura like Vritta have become devoted to Vishnu? Sukadeva told him the story of Chitraketu. Many years ago, in the kingdom of Surasena and in the city of Madhura, a king named Chitraketu used to rule. The king has had many wives, but he was sad because he did not have a son. The sage Angira came to visit him once, and the king told the sage about his misery. Angira decided that a yagna had to be performed so that Chitraketu might have a son. The eldest of Chitraketu's wife was named Kritadyoti, and the rice pudding that came out of the sacrifice was fed to her. In due course, a son was indeed born, and everyone rejoiced. Chitraketu was delighted. He loved his son, and he seemed to love Kritadyoti even more now that he has given birth to a boy. The other queens felt slighted and became jealous. They fed the boy poison, and the boy died. Chitraketu and Kritadyoti went mad with grief. To hide their crime, the other queens also pretended to weep. The sages Angira and Narada came to comfort Chitraketu. They said, "There is no need for sorrow. Who are you sorrowing for? What is this boy to you? He was nothing to you in your earlier life. People are born again and again. Again and again they adopt physical bodies, but these are temporary, nothing but illusions. Your son's Atman had not been killed. To think otherwise is to be ignorant." To convince Chitraketu, Narada uses his powers to bring back the Atman of the dead prince. He told the Atman, "Come and enter the body of the dead prince. You still have some life left as the prince. Live for some more time. Enjoy your father's property and be king after him." The Atman replied, "Which life, which father, and what property? I have lived many lives. I have had many lives and many fathers. Which body are you talking about?" These words convinced the relatives. They gave up their sorrowing and performed the last rites for the dead prince. The queens who had poisoned him became penitent. As penance for their sin, they did prayaschita on the banks of the river Yamuna. Chitraketu himself performed tapasya, and through the powers that he acquired, he got to meet Vishnu. He spread the knowledge of Vishnu everywhere, and this inflated his ego no end. On one occasion, he even insulted Shiva and Parvati. Shiva ignored the insult, but Parvati cursed Chitraketu that he would be born as an asura. It was he who had been born as Vritra. This explains his devotion to Vishnu. Diti's children. The sage Kashyapa married Diti and Aditi. Diti's children were known as the Daityas, and Aditi's children were the Adityas or Devas. Diti was very upset that Indra and other gods kept killing her children. She resolved to have a son who would kill Indra. Accordingly, she started to serve her husband really well. The sage Kashyapa was pleased and asked her, "What boon do you desire?" Diti replied, "Give me a son who would kill Indra." Kashyapa was in a fix. He said, "All right. You will have to perform certain rites for a year. If you do them for an entire year, you will have a son who will kill Indra. But if you stop before a year, the son will become a friend of the gods." Diti agreed to this condition. The rites included the avoidance of 31 acts that were prohibited, such as lying or cursing. It was also forbidden to go to sleep without washing one's feet. Indra has got to know about his aunt's desire, and he was always hanging around waiting for a chance to bring his aunt's wishes to naught, but he pretended to serve Diti faithfully. Once Diti was very tired and went to sleep without washing her feet. Indra saw his chance. He entered Diti's womb and sliced up the baby who was there into 7 parts with his vajra. These parts began to cry, and Indra said, Ma Rudra, that is, don't cry. He then cut up each of the 7 parts into 7 parts again. There were thus 49 parts, and they asked, You are our cousin. Why are you killing us? I shall not kill you, replied Indra. You will be called the Maruts, and you will be my friends and companions. These Maruts became gods, and Diti was so happy to see them that she forgave Indra all his crimes. Hiranyakashipu and Prahlada. You probably remember that Vishnu adopted the form of a boar to kill the Asura Hiranyakashipu. And then Hiranyakashipu had a brother named Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu was furious to learn of his brother's death. He resolved to kill Vishnu. He called all the Asuras together and asked them to stop all yagnas and Vedas recital on earth. The Asuras did as they had been told, and religious ceremonies on earth came to an end. The gods were oppressed and fled from heaven. Hiranyakasipu consoled his mother and nephews and asked them not to sorrow. He would avenge his brother. Hiranyakasipu wished to become invincible. He therefore started to perform very difficult tapasya. He stood on the tips of his toes and raised his arms up. In that position, he began to meditate. His hair grew matted, and the termites built a hill all around his body. For 100 years, Hiranyakasipu meditated thus without food and water. Without food and water. Finally, Brahma appeared before him and agreed to grant him a boon. Grant me the boon that I may not be killed by any being of your creation, said Hiranyakashipu, that I may not be killed during night or day, and that I may not be killed by men or beasts, in the sky or on earth. Make me invincible from all weapons and grant me the boon that devas or asuras may do me no harm. Brahma granted Hiranyakasipu this rarest of rare boons, rendered invincible. Hiranyakasipu conquered the 3 worlds. He drove Indra out of heaven and ruled there instead. The gods sought refuge with Vishnu. Vishnu asked them to be patient. He told them that he himself would kill Hiranyakasipu when the Asura started to oppress his own son Prahlada. Apart from Prahlada, Hiranyakasipu had 3 other sons, but Prahlada was an exception. He was devoted to Vishnu and thought of Vishnu all the time. Sukracharya was the teacher of the Asuras, and Sukracharya had 2 sons named Shanda and Amarka. These two began to teach Prahlada and his brothers, but no matter what they taught, Prahlada continued to talk about Vishnu. At first, Hiranyakashipu thought that this was childish foolishness and would pass away, but it did not. Prahlada continued to be devoted to Vishnu. Hiranyakasipu did not wish to have such a son. He instructed his servants to kill Prahlada. The Asuras struck Prahlada with spears, but since Prahlada was protected by Vishnu, the spears did no harm. Elephants were let loose on the prince, snakes were made to bite him, he was thrown down from mountain tops, he was fed poison, he was thrown into the water, but nothing happened to Prahlada. Prahlada was thus kept imprisoned for a while, and he spent the time in instructing the other Asura children on the virtues of being devoted to Vishnu. He told them how he had become devoted to Vishnu. When Hiranyakasipu was away on his tapasya, the gods attacked the demons and defeated them. Indra abducted Prahlada's mother, but Narada convinced Indra that the abduction was a sin. Prahlada's mother was released and taken to Narada's hermitage. Prahlada was still in the womb then, and he listened to the words of wisdom that taught his mother. It was this knowledge that he still remembered. The Asura children started to get converted as a result of Prahlada's teaching, and Hiranyakashipu was not prepared to tolerate this. He had Prahlada brought before him again. Who protects you every time I try to kill you? He asked Prahlada. Vishnu was the answer. Vishnu? Exclaimed Hiranyakashipu. Where is Vishnu? He is everywhere, replied the son. Everywhere? Asked Hiranyakashipu. He pointed to the crystal pillar and said, Is Vishnu inside the pillar? See, I am striking this pillar. Where is Vishnu? Hiranyakashipu struck the pillar with a blow of his fish. A terrible sound was then heard from inside the pillar. A being came out from inside the pillar. It was neither man nor beast. It was half man and half lion. This was the Narasimha Avatara of Vishnu. Narasimha's eyes were like molten gold. A golden mane hung around his face. His teeth were as sharp as swords. His claws were exceedingly sharp. Hiranyakashipu attacked Narasimha with a mace, but Narasimha caught the Asura up in his arms. He effortlessly flung aside the sword and the shield that Hiranyakashipu had grasped. He placed the demon across his thighs and tore apart his breast with the claws. He then killed many of the other asuras. Prahlada came to Narasimha and worshipped him. Narasimha offered to grant him a boon, and Prahlada wanted the boon that his father's sins might be forgiven. This boon Vishnu granted. Prahlada became the king of the asuras, and he ruled well according to the dictates of Dharma, righteousness. Dharma. There are four classes, Varna, and each class had to act according to what is prescribed for it. The Brahmanas should study and perform religious rites. The Kshatriyas had to protect the world. Agriculture and trade is for the Vaishyas, and the Sudras should serve the other three classes. There are other four ashramas, stages of life prescribed by Dharma. The first is that of brahmacharya or celibate studenthood. The second is garhasthya or the householder stage. The third is vanaprastha or the forest dwelling stage. And the last is sannyasa or the hermit stage. Manvantaras. Each Manvantara is an era. 14 such Manvantara constitute a kalpa cycle. The universe is destroyed at the end of each kalpa. A Manu rules over each Manvantara, and the title of Indra or king of the gods is held by different individuals in different Manvantaras. In the present cycle, 6 Manvantaras have passed. The first Manu was Vyayambhuva Manu, the second Manu was Varochista, the third Uttama, the fourth Tamasa, the fifth Raivata, the sixth Chaksusha, the seventh Shraddha Deva. It is the seventh Manvantara that is now going on. There will be 7 more Manvantara before the universe is destroyed. The 8th Manu will be Savarni, the 9th Daksha Savarni, the 10th Brahma Savarni, the 11th Dharma Savarni, the 12th Rudra Savarni, the 13th Deva Savarni, and the 14th Indra Savarni. In each Manvantara, it is the duty of the ruling Manu to uphold the dharma of the 4 classes and the 4 stages of life. The elephant story. There was a beautiful mountain named Trikuta. The waves of the ocean lapped at the foot of the Trikuta. There were thick forests on the mountain, and in the forest there lived a king of elephants. He ruled over all the other elephants in the herd. Once that elephant came to bathe in a lake where a crocodile lived. The crocodile caught hold of the elephant's leg. Try as he might, the elephant could not free himself, nor were the other elephants in a position to help. The elephant and the crocodile struggled for 1,000 years. When 1,000 years ago the elephant began to tire, although the crocodile's strength was still undismissed, the elephant started to pray to Vishnu. Vishnu appeared and cut off the crocodile's mouth with his Sudarsana Chakra. Strange as it might seem, the crocodile then adopted the form of a Gandharva. His name was Huhu. He had been cursed by a sage that he would become a crocodile, and the sage had told him that he would be freed from the curse by Vishnu. That had now happened. In fact, the elephant had earlier also been a king named Indradrumna, and he had been cursed by a sage that he would be born as an elephant. Indradhyumna too was freed from his curse and became Vishnu's companion. Thus Vishnu saves whoever prays to him. The churning of the ocean. Many years ago, the churning of the ocean, Samudra Manthana, took place. The Devas and the Asuras were always fighting with each other, but Vishnu advised the Devas to have a temporary truce with the Asuras. The two sides should get together, churn the ocean. Amritra, a life-giving drink, would emerge from the ocean and make the gods strong. Vishnu would ensure the demons would not get a share of the Amrita. The king of the demons then was Vali. Indra met Vali to try and persuade him that a truce should be called and that they should churn the ocean together. The demons agreed. They too wanted the Amrita. Mount Mandara was to be the churning road, so the gods and the demons grasped the mountain, dragged it to the ocean. Vasuki, the king of the snakes, was promised some Amrita, and he agreed to be the rope of the churning. The demons grasped Vasuki's mouth, the gods grasped his tail, and so the churning began. Vishnu adopted the form of a turtle, and the back of the turtle constituted the base on which Mount Mandara could rest. The first object that emerged from the ocean was a terrible poison known as Hala Hala. What was to be done about this poison? It could destroy the world. The gods and the demons went to Shiva and begged him to rescue them, and Shiva drank up the poison. Nothing happened to Shiva except his throat became blue. He is therefore known as Nilakantha, blue of throat. A little bit of poison was, however, spilled on the ground. The scorpions and the snakes and poisonous herbs obtained their poison from this. The churning continued, and a cow named Surabhi came out. There was a Kama Dhenu, that is, it yielded whatever one desired. The sages took this cow to Brahmaloka. Then a handsome white horse named Uchchaishrava emerged and was given to Vali. Next came Airavata, the king of the elephants, and 16 other elephants. And what should emerge next but a beautiful jewel named Kaustubha? Vishnu accepted this as an adornment for his breast. The Parijata tree followed. It was placed in Indra's garden. It was Kalpa Vriksha, that is, it produced whatever one desired. The Apsaras emerged next. They wore golden jewelry and beautiful clothes. The goddess Lakshmi came out after this. Her appearance lit up the world. She was so attractive that the gods, the demons, and the humans all wanted to possess her. The sages anointed her with sacred water. The ocean gave her clothes. Varuna gave her a garland. Vishwakarma jewelry, and Brahma a lotus. Lakshmi looked for a perfect being to whom she could belong. The only perfect being was Vishnu, and Lakshmi therefore married Vishnu. The goddess of wine is Varuni. She followed Lakshmi out of the ocean. She was given to the demons. Then Dhanvantari emerged. He held the pot of Amrita in his hands. Dhanvantari was the originator of all medicine. The demons immediately snatched the pot of Amrita and ran away with it. The gods became despondent, but Vishnu created illusions so that the Asuras fell to fighting amongst themselves over the Amrita. Meanwhile, Vishnu adopted the form of a beautiful woman, and the Asuras also began to fight over who should marry this woman. They asked the woman to divide the Amrita Amrita for them. Of course, Vishnu did no such thing. He gave the Amrita to the Devas, but not the Asuras. The demons were cheated. The only demon who managed to get the little Amrita was Rahu. He was, however, caught while he was in the act of swallowing the Amrita. Vishnu cut off Rahu's head with his chakra. The Amrita never entered Rahu's body, but since Rahu's head had tasted the Amrita, it had become immortal. Brahma therefore converted the head into a planet. The demons had by now realized the fraud. They attacked the gods with all sort of weapons, but the gods had drunk the Amrita and became strengthened. After a prolonged battle, they defeated the demons. Vali. Sukracharya was the teacher of the Asuras. Sukracharya performed a yajna named Vishvajita for Bali, and Asura became invincible. He attacked Indra and the other gods and drove them out of heaven. He became the ruler of three worlds and performed 100 Ashwamedha sacrifices in celebration. Aditi was unhappy to see her children suffer thus. She performed tapasya so that Vishnu might be born as her son and defeat Vali. The tapasya was successful and Vishnu was born as the son of Kashyapa and Aditi. The son was a dwarf, Vamana, and this was therefore known as the dwarf incarnation of Vishnu. Vali was performing an Aswamedha sacrifice. The sacrifice was being held on the banks of Narmada river, and Vali had announced that on the occasion he would not refuse a boon to anyone. The dwarf went to the sacrifice. What is your desire? Vali asked of the dwarf. Nothing very much, replied the dwarf, only as much of land as can be covered by three of my steps. Agreed, said Vali. Sukracharya had seen through Vishnu's game and he tried to restrain Vali, but Vali would not listen to his teacher. He would not go back on his word. The dwarf started to grow in size. It became gigantic. With one step, it covered the earth. With the second, it covered heaven. With the third, the final step, it covered all the other lokas. Vali has nowhere left to go but to the underworld. The Fish Avatara. Many years ago, there was a flood when the world was immersed in water. Brahma had been sleeping then and seizing the opportunity. A demon named Hayagriva stole the sacred Vedas. That was the time when Vishnu adopted the fish, Matsya incarnation. There used to be a king named Satyavrata. He was performing tapasya in the water of the river Kritamala. Suddenly he noticed a very small fish swimming in the water in the palm of his hands. Satyavrata was about to throw the fish into the water, but the fish spoke back. Don't throw me back into the river, it said. I am scared of being eaten up by the animals that live in the water. Satyavrata placed the fish in a pot and brought it home to his hermitage. Within a night, the fish grew so big and it could no longer be kept inside the pot. Satyavrata placed the fish inside a vat, but in a matter of seconds, the fish became too big for the vat. Satyavrata put it inside a pond, but the fish became too big for the pond as well. Satyavrata took the fish to a lake, but even the lake proved to be too small. Finally, Satyavrata took it to ocean and prepared to release it there. Don't release me in the ocean, said the fish. I'm scared of the animals that live in the ocean. By now, Satyavrata had realized that this was no ordinary fish. Who are you? He said. Why are you deluding me? You must be Lord Vishnu. The fish told him that it was indeed Lord Vishnu. It also told him that 7 days later there will be flood that would swallow up the three lokas of Bhuloka, Loka, and Loka. A huge boat would then arrive before Satyavrata, and the king should climb onto the boat with all living beings, the seven great sages, Saptarishis, and food grains. The fish would also arrive, and Satyavrata should tie the boat to the fish horn with the great snake, Vasuki, as a rope. In that manner, Satyavrata would be saved from the havoc of the flood. Having said all this, the fish disappeared, but everything happened just as the fish had said it would. While they floated on the water, the fish recited the Matsya Purana to Satyavrata. King Satyavratha later became Vaivasvata Manu. In this form of fish, Vishnu also killed the demon Hayagriva and retrieved the Vedas. The sons of Vaivasvata Manu. Vaivasvata Manu had no sons. His wife was named Shraddha. Because they had no son, husband and wife decided to perform a sacrifice. Shraddha wanted a daughter and she instructed the priest accordingly. A daughter named Ila was born from the sacrifice, but Manu was unhappy because he had wanted a son. Manu's guru was the sage Vasistha, and Vasistha was exceedingly powerful. When Manu complained to his teacher, Vasistha used his power to transform Ila into a son named Sudhyumna. In fact, Sudhyumna or Ila alternated between being a man and woman for stretches of 1 month at a time. When Ila was a woman, the sage Buddha married her, and they had a son named Pururava. And when Sudhyumna was a man, he had three sons named Utkala, Gaya, and Vimala. Manu was not satisfied. He wished that he might have a proper son, and he prayed for 100 years that this might happen. 10 sons were born to him, and their names were Ikshvaku, Nirga, Saryati, Dista, Drista, Karushya, Narishyanta, Prishadra, Nabaga, and Kavi. Prishadra's guru asked him to look after the cows. Prishadra stayed awake at night to do this. One night it was raining. A tiger came and entered the cowshed. The cows ran hither and thither in fright, and the tiger caught a cow. Prishadra came running to see what was happening. In the darkness, Prishadra mistook a cow for the tiger and killed it. His teacher was furious at the mistake and cursed Prishadra that henceforth he would live like a Sudra. Parishadra did not have any children. The youngest son, Kavi, did not marry either. He went off to the forest to perform meditation, but all the others had several children. Sukanya and Chyavana. Shrayati's daughter was Sukanya. He was very pretty and his eyes were like the petals of lotus flowers. Once Shrayati and Sukanya went to the forest to visit the hermitage of sage Chyavana. The princess and her friends went around picking flowers. Sukanya suddenly came across a termite hill. There were two holes in the hill which shone with peculiar light. She inserted a thorn into the two holes and was amazed to see the blood ooze out. She did not realize that it was the sage Savana who was inside the hill and whom she had succeeded in blinding. To appease the sage, Shrayati married Sukanya to him. After some time, the two Asvinis came to visit the hermitage. They were twins and were also the physicians of the goods. Savanya promised them a share in the coveted juice of the Soma herb and persuaded them to treat him so that he might become handsome. The Asvinis asked Shavana to bath in a lake, and the sage became exceedingly handsome. Ambarisha. King Ambarisha was descended from Nabaga. He ruled over the entire world and possessed all the riches that one might desire. But Ambarisha was not really interested in all this. His mind was devoted to Vishnu. He and his wife decided to perform a special religious rite. At the end of the ceremony, they were to fast for 3 nights. And if the ceremony were to be properly conducted, they would eat as soon as the 3 nights were over. While all this was going on, the sage Durvasa arrived. Ambarisa worshipped him and asked him to partake of some food. Durvasa agreed but wanted to have a bath first. Time passed and the sage did not return. Ambarisa was in a dilemma. He could not eat before his guests and he had to eat since the 3 nights were over. If the auspicious moment passed, the entire ceremony would be wasted. Not knowing what to do, Ambarika drank some water as a compromise. Durvasa returned and immediately realized that Ambarisha had drunk some water. The sage was hot tempered and his anger was easily aroused. He tore off a hair and flung it down on the ground. This created a demon which advanced with a sword to kill Ambarisa. But Ambarisa was devoted to Vishnu, so Vishnu's Sudarsana Chakra arrived and destroyed the demon. The chakra then started to pursue Durvasa. Wherever Durvasa fled, the chakra followed. Finally, Durvasa went to Vishnu Loka and fell at Vishnu's feet, but Vishnu told him to go to Ambarisa instead. Still pursued by the chakra, Durvasa went to Ambarisa and begged for mercy. Ambarisa pacified the chakra. Ikshvaku's son. Ikshvaku had 100 sons, the chief among them being Vikuksi Nimi Dantaka. Once Ikshvaku was performing a funeral ceremony. He called Vikuksi to him and said, "Go and get some meat from the forest." Vikuksi went to the forest and killed many animals, but he was exhausted as a result of all this exertion and ate the meat of a rabbit. The rest of the meat he brought home to his father, and Ikshvaku gave the meat to the sage Vasistha so that the funeral ceremony might be performed, but Vasistha said that the meat was tainted and could not be used for the ceremony. It had already been eaten. When Ikshvaku found out from his son what had happened, he vanished Vikuksi from the kingdom. After Ikshvaku died, Vikuksi returned and became king. His son Puranjaya was also known as Indravaha or Kakutsa. The reason for this was as follows. Once there was a fight between the gods and the demons, and the gods craved Puranjaya's help. Puranjaya agreed on condition that he could ride into battle perch on Indra's soldiers. Puranjaya fought so bravely that the demons were defeated. Sagara and the descent of Ganga. Sagara and the descent of Ganga. Among Ikshvaku's descendant was King Sagara. Sagara had once performed an Asvamedha yagna, but Indra came and stole the sacrificial horse. Sagara had two wives, Sumati and Kesini. Sumati had 60,000 sons and Kesini one. When the horse could not be found, Sagara sent Sumati's 60,000 sons to look for it. The sons looked for the horse everywhere and finally found it in the hermitage of the sage Kapila. The mischievous Indra had hidden it there, but Sagara's son did not know that Indra was responsible. They concluded that Kapila was the thief and attacked him, but such was the power of Kapila's rage that all 60,000 sons were burned into ashes. Kashini's son was Asamanjasa, and Asamanjasa's son was Ashumana. When the 60,000 sons did not return, Sagara sent Asumana to look for his uncles and the lost horse. Asumana discovered the horse in the sage Kapila's ashrama, but being different from the uncle, he began to pray to the sage. Kapila said, Asumana, take the horse. Your uncles are here, burnt into ashes. There is no way to rescue them except through the waters of the river Ganga. Ashumana returned with the horse and sacrifice was completed. Asumana performed a lot of tapasya so that the river Ganga might be brought down to earth, but he was unsuccessful, nor did his son Dilipa succeed. Dilipa's son was Bhagaratha, and Bhagaratha performed such difficult tapasya that a river Ganga agreed to grant him a boon. Bhagirath told her what he desired, but asked Ganga, when I descend to earth, who will break my fall? If no one does, I will go straight through the earth and land up in the underworld. Bhagirath prayed to Shiva and persuaded him to break Ganga's fall. Shiva held her on his head before releasing her to the earth. Bhagirath led Ganga to where his ancestors' ashes were, and at the touch of the sacred water they were purified and taken up to heaven. Rama of Ramayana fame was also descended from Ikshvaku's line. Chandra Vamsha. Brihaspati was the guru of the Devas and his wife was Tara. Soma was the sage artist's son. Soma abducted Tara, and although Brihaspati asked him to return his wife, Soma refused. A war then started between the gods and the demons. The gods fought on Brihaspati's side and the demons on Soma's. Soma finally returned Tara, but Soma and Tara had by then got a son. This son was named Buddha, and he was very wise. You know that Pururava was Buddha and Ila's son. Once Pururava met this beautiful Apsara Urvasi, they married and lived together happily for many years. Their sons were Ayu, Shrutayu, Satyayu, Aya, Vijaya, and Jaya. Gadi was descended from Vijaya. Gadi had named the daughter Satyavati. A Brahmana named Richika wished to marry Satyavati, but Gadi did not think that Richika was the right sort of husband for Satyavati, so he said, I need a bride price. Bring me 1,000 horses. Each horse should be as white as the moon and have one black ear. This seemed to be an impossible task, but Ruchika managed to get horses from Varuna. He thus married Satyavati. Both Satyavati and Satyavati's mother, Ruchika's mother-in-law, wished to have sons, and Ruchika arranged a sacrifice. He obtained 2 bowls of rice pudding from the sacrifice and gave one to his wife and the other to his mother-in-law to eat. They would then bear sons. Since he himself was a Brahmana, Richika had ensured that Satyavati's rice pudding was such that the sons would be Brahman-like, and since his father-in-law was a Kshatriya, he had ensured that the mother-in-law's rice pudding was such that her son would be Kshatriya-like. But Satyavati's mother thought that her son-in-law might have given the better rice pudding to her daughter, so she persuaded Satyavati to exchange bowl. When Richika found out what had happened, he told Satyavati, you shouldn't have done that. Now your son would behave like a Kshatriya. I don't want a son like a Kshatriya, replied Satyavati. Can't you do something so that my grandson is like that? Let my son be like a Brahmana. Richika agreed. Richika and Satyavati's son were Jamandagni, and Jamadagni married Renuka. Jamadagni and Renuka had several sons, the youngest of whom was Parashurama. Parashurama. Arjuna was the king of the Haihaya kingdom. He was so blessed by the sage Dattatreya so that he had 1,000 arms and was formidable in battle. Arjuna had gone on a hunt and arrived at Jamadagni's hermitage. The sage Jamadagni had a Kamadhenu, that is, a cow that gave whatever one wanted. The cow produced whatever was needed for feeding Arjuna and his many followers. Arjuna took a liking to the cows and tried to forcibly take it away. Jamadagni did not protest. Parashurama was away at that time. He returned and learned of Arjuna's deed. He took up his weapons and went to the king's capital. There he killed all of Arjuna's soldiers. Arjuna himself came out to fight. Since he possessed 1,000 arms, he wielded 500 bows at a time. But Parashurama destroyed all these bows. He then killed Arjuna, and Arjuna's 10,000 sons fled from the field of battle. Parashurama returned with the cow. However, Jamadagni was not happy. Son, you have committed a crime, he said. You should not have killed a king. That is a sin. You need to perform penance. Go away for a year and visit all the places of pilgrimage. Parashurama did as his father bid him. Jamadagni's wife Renuka had misbehaved with him once. Thereafter, Jamadagni had requested his sons to kill their mother. The only son who had agreed to do so was Parashurama. He had killed his mother and also his brothers for having disobeyed their father. Jamadagni had been so pleased at his son's obedience that he had wanted to grant Parashurama a boon. Parashurama had wanted the boon that his dead mother and brothers might come to life again, and this had been granted. While Parashurama was away, the 10,000 sons of Arjuna came and attacked the hermitage. They killed Jamadagni. So angry was Parashurama at this dastardly act of the Kshatriyas that he killed all the Kshatriyas in the world with his axe, Parasu. 21 time he rid the world of all the Kshatriyas. Near the battlefield of Kurukshetra there were 9 lakes. These lakes had been formed with the blood of all the Kshatriyas. Parashurama had now given up violence and lived on Mount Mahendra. He is believed to be immortal. Yayati. Pururava also had a son named Ayu. From Ayu was descended Yayati. Yayati had 2 wives, Devayani and Sharmistha. Devayani was Sukracharya's daughter. You probably remember that Sukracharya was the teacher of the Asuras. The king of the Asuras were Brihaparva, and Sarmistha was Brisaparva's daughter. Sarmistha and Devayani used to be friends. They had gone to a lake to bathe and had taken off their clothes. When they were hurriedly putting on their clothes after bathing, Sarmistha put on Devayani's clothes by mistake. Devayani did not like this at all. How dare Sarmistha do this? She asked. My father is her father's teacher. How dare an inferior wear a superior's clothes? Who is inferior and who is superior? Replied Sarmistha. My father is the king. You people get to eat because of my father's generosity. Saying this, Sarmistha threw Devyani into a well that was nearby and returned home. King Yayati happened to be passing. When he came to drink water at the well, he discovered Devayani. Yayati took out Devayani from the well and she fell in love with her benefactor. Yayati agreed to marry her. Devayani returned home and told her father how she had been treated by Sarmistha. Sukracharya was greatly saddened to hear and decided to leave the Asuras. But Brihasparva fell at the Guru's feet and begged for mercy. Sukracharya agreed to stay on the condition that Sarmistha became Devayani's mate. Yayati married both Devayani and Sarmistha. Devayani's son were Yadu and Turvasu, and Samistra's son were Dhruyu, Anu, and Puru. After several years had passed, Yayati became old, but his days for worldly pleasure had still not passed. So he called his sons to him and asked them to take his old age from him. He wanted their youth instead. All the sons except Puru refused, and Yayati accepted Puru's youth. Puru took on his father's old age. After 1,000 years had passed, Yayati got tired of worldly pleasure. He returned the youth to Puru and took back his old age. Parikshit was descendant from Puru, and the Yadavas were descendant from Yadu. Dushmanta and Shakuntala. One of Parikshit's ancestors was King Dushmanta. Dushmanta had gone on a hunt wandering around in the forest. He came to the hermitage of the sage Kanva. Then he met a beautiful woman and fell in love with her. Beautiful lady, he asked, who are you? I am smitten with love for you. I am Shakuntala. The woman replied, I am the daughter of Vishwamitra and the Apsara Menaka. The sage Kanva had brought me up. Dusmanta married Shakuntala. He promised to come back for her and left for the capital, but once he was in the capital, he completely forgot about Shakuntala. Meanwhile, Shakuntala gave birth to a boy. His name was Bharata. But eventually, Dusmanta accepted Shakuntala and Bharata as his wife and son. Bharata ruled after Dusmanta and became a powerful king. He performed 55 Aswamedha yajnas. He ruled for 27,000 years. The building of Dvaraka. Kamsa was so much of an oppressor that Krishna was forced to kill him. Kamsa had two wives named Asti and Prapti, and they were the daughters of Jarasandha, the king of Magadha. Jarasandha was very angry to learn that his son-in-law had been killed, and he resolved to kill all the Yadavas. He raised an army that were 21 battalions, Akshauhini, strong, and laid siege to the city of Madura. Madura was surrounded from all sides by Jarasandha's army. The Yadavas came out to fight and, led by Balarama and Krishna, defeated Jarasandha. But Jarasandha came back again with an army. Again he was defeated. This went on. 17 times Jarasandha lost, and 17 times he retired to Magadha. He then began to raise an army for the 18th time. Meanwhile, the Yadavas were faced with another enemy. This was in the form of the king named Kalayavana, who was about to attack Madura. Krishna realized that the Yadavas needed a stronger and more fortified capital if they were to face up to enemies from two directions. A beautiful city was accordingly built on the source of the ocean. It had wide roads and magnificent houses. More importantly, it was much better protected than the city of Madura. This new city was Dvaraka or Dvaravati. Kalayavana. Krishna now decided to do something about Kalayavana. He came along to where Kalayavana was. After seeing Krishna, Kalayavana wanted to attack him, but Krishna began to run and Kalayavana followed him. Krishna had a plan. He led Kalayavana to a cave in the mountainside. It was dark inside the cave, and Kalayavana could not see very well. In the dim light, he saw a man sleeping inside the cave. Kalayavana thought it had to be Krishna and kicked the body, but the sleeper was not Krishna. It was a person named Muchukunda. He had been sleeping for many years and had been woken up by Kalayavana. He realized that this person had woken him up from his sleep, and he looked angrily at Kalayavana. Kalayavana was burned to ashes from the blaze of this anger. How did this come about? Muchukunda was a king of the Ikshvaku dynasty. The gods were busy fighting with the demons and needed some aid. Muchukunda fought on the side of the gods for many years, but eventually the gods obtained a general in the form of the god Kartikeya and no longer needed Muchukunda. So they told Muchukunda, King, you have fought with the demons for many years and have successfully protected us. You have given up all worldly pleasures, but we no longer need your service. What do you propose to do? So many years have passed that all your friends, relatives, and subjects on earth are now dead. Ask for whatever boon you desire. Muchukunda replied, I am tired after fighting for so many years. I feel like having a long sleep. Please grant me the boon that whoever wakes me up will be burned to ashes by my wrath. Thus it was Kalayavana was killed. Rukmini and Rukmi. There was a king named Bhishmaka who ruled over the kingdom of Vidarbha. The king had 5 sons and a daughter. The eldest son was Rukmi and the daughter was Rukmini. Rukmini had heard of Krishna's prowess and other qualities and wished to marry him. Her father was not adverse to such an alliance, but Rukmi hated Krishna and refused to accept such a marriage. He wished to get his sister married off to Shishupala, the king of the kingdom of Chetdi. Rukmini sent a Brahmana as emissary to Krishna. Through the Brahmana, Rukmini said, My marriage has been fixed for the day after tomorrow, and I am to be married to Shishupala. I want to marry you instead. Please come and abduct me. Tomorrow I shall go to visit the temple of the goddess Parvati. This is outside the city. Please come and abduct me then. Krishna came to Kundina, the capital of the kingdom of Vidarbha. Shishupala also came there with a large number of companions and many gifts for Vishmaka. Vishmaka made separate lodging arrangements for Shishupala and Krishna. Balarama and several other Yadavas had also followed Krishna to Kundina. When Rukmini went to visit the temple, Krishna abducted her. The many other kings who had assembled could only look on in wonder. When they recovered from the shock, they attacked Krishna, but the Yadavas easily repelled his enemies. Witnessing the defeat of his allies, Rukmi entered the fray with his own army. I will not return to Kundina without killing Krishna and rescuing Rukmini, he resolved. But Krishna destroyed all Rukmi's arrows and other weapons. He was about to kill Rukmi with a sword. Rukmini intervened. He is my brother, she said. Please spare him. Krishna agreed. But Rukmi had resolved that he would not return to Kundina without killing Krishna and rescuing Rukmini. What was going to happen to that oath? Instead of returning to Kundina, Rukmi began to live in a city named Bhojakata. Krishna brought Rukmini back to Dvaraka and married her there. Their sons was Pradyumna. When Pradyumna was only 10 years old, an asura named Sambara kidnapped the baby and threw into the ocean. There the baby was swallowed by a big fish. The fish was caught by a fisherman and he bought the fish as a gift to Sambara. Sambara sent the fish to the kitchen and when his cook cut open the fish's stomach, they discovered the baby inside. In Sambara's household, there lived a woman named Mayavati. Sambara handed over the baby to Mayavati to rear. When Pradyumna grew up, Mayavati told him the story of his being kidnapped. Pradyumna challenged Sambara to a duel and killed the Asura. He then married Mayavati and returned to Dvaraka. The Symantaka jewel. There was a Yadava named Satrajit. He was devoted to the sun god Surya. Surya was pleased with Satrajit and gave him a wonderful jewel named Shamantaka. The jewel shone like the sun itself. Satrajit used to wear the jewel around his neck, and such were the wonderful properties of the jewel that all disease and famine vanished from the Yadava kingdom. It was Krishna's opinion that the jewel should rightfully be in the possession of Ugrasena, the king of the Yadavas, but Satyajit refused to part with the jewel. Satyajit's brother was Prasanjit, and Prasanjit borrowed the jewel from his brother. He then went to the forest on a hunt and was killed by a lion. The lion was in turn killed by the bear Jambavana. Jambavana brought the jewel home to his cave and gave it to his son to play with. Meanwhile, Prasanjit's dead body was discovered, and Satyajit concluded it was Krishna who had killed his brother and stolen the jewel. The rumor quickly spread amongst the Yadavas. To vindicate his reputation, Krishna went to the forest to try to find out what had happened. He followed the trail of Jambavan's cave, and a terrible fight waged for 18 days and nights between Jambavana and Krishna. Jambavana finally accepted defeat. He not only returned symantaka to Krishna but also married his daughter Jambavati to him. When Krishna returned the jewel to Satyajit, Satyajit was ashamed that he had suspected Krishna in the first place. As atonement, he gave his daughter Satyabhama in marriage to Krishna. There were three other Yadavas who had wanted to marry Satyabhama. Their names are Akrura, Kritavarma, and Satadhanva. They were not at all happy when Satyavana had been married off to Krishna. Akrura and Kritavarma advised Satadhanva to kill Satyajit. Satyadhanva did this and stole the Symantaka jewel, but knowing that Balarama and Krishna would exact revenge for this deed, he fled from Dvaraka. He, however, left the jewel with Akrura. Balarama and Krishna pursued Satyadhanva, and Krishna killed the murderer. But they could find no trace of the jewel. Akrura, of course, kept his possession of the jewel as a complete secret, but Akrura and Kritavarma were not at all sure that their complicity in the crime would not be detected. They therefore left Dvaraka, and immediately disease and drought became rampant in the city. From this, Krishna deducted that the jewel must have been in Akrura's possession. He brought Akrura back to Dvaraka and persuaded him to confess that the jewel was indeed in his possession. Narakasura. A demon named Narakasura ruled in the city of Pragjotisapura. He was the son of the earth, Prithvi. The demon was so strong that he drove Indra out of heaven and stole Indra's umbrella and earring. Indra went and complained to Krishna. The city of Pragjotisapura was very difficult to enter. It was surrounded by mountains on all sides, and there were forts on the mountain. A demon named Mura guarded the city, but Krishna destroyed the mountains and the forts with his mace. He then killed Mura with his Sudarsana Chakra. Mura's 7 sons were also killed by Krishna. Narakasura now ascended an elephant and came to fight with Krishna, but he met the same fate as Mura. Krishna retrieved and returned in Indra's umbrella and earrings. Narakasura had imprisoned 16,000 princesses. Krishna freed them, had them brought back to Dwaraka, and married them all. Rukmi's death. Rukmi, as you probably remember, had begun to live in the city of Bozakata. Rukmi's daughter was Rukmavati and she was married to Krishna's son Pradyumna. Pradyumna and Rukmavati had a son named Aniruddha. Aniruddha got married to Rukmi's granddaughter Rochana. On the occasion of Aniruddha and Rochana's marriage, Balarama, Krishna and the other Yadavas came to Bhojakata. Balarama was very fond of playing dice and so was Rukmi. They began to have a game. Balarama first placed 100 golden coin as a bet and lost. He then staked 1,000 golden coins and lost again. Not content, Balarama now placed 10,000 gold coins as a bet. Rukmi won yet again. Finally, Balarama staked a lakh of golden coins. This time, Balarama won, but the evil Rukmi denied that Balarama had won and insisted that it was he who had won. This so angered Balarama that he killed Rukmi with a club. Vana. Vali used to be the king of the Asuras. Vali had 100 sons. The eldest was named Vana. Vana was devoted to Shiva and he ruled in the city of Sonitapura. Vana had pleased Shiva so much that Shiva had agreed to be the guardian of Sonitapura. Vana had a daughter named Usha. Usha dreamt of Aniruddha and fell in love with him, but she did not know who Aniruddha was. He did not know his name. However, Usha had a friend named Chitralekha who was very good at drawing portraits. Chitralekha drew the portraits of gods, Gandharvas, Asuras, Yakshas, and men, and Usha identified Aniruddha as the person she had fallen in love with. But how were Aniruddha and Usha to meet? It was again Chitralekha who found the solution. She bought Aniruddha from Dvaraka and he and Usha were secretly married. But Vana's guard discovered what was happening and went and reported this to the Asura king. Vana came to Usha's palace and discovered Aniruddha there. Although Aniruddha fought as best as he could, he was defeated and imprisoned by Vana. News of Aniruddha's imprisonment reached Dwarka and the Yadavas attacked Sonitapura. Vana came out to fight, and because of his pledge to be guardian of the city, Shiva also fought on Vana's side. Kartikeya had also come to fight on the side of his father, Shiva. A miraculous battle ensued. Kartikeya was defeated by Pradyumna and Shiva by Krishna. Vana was also defeated by Krishna, but thanks to Shiva's pleading on behalf of the Asura, Krishna spared Vana's life. The Yadavas returned to Dwarka with Aniruddha and Usha. Poundraka and the king of Kashi. A king named Poundraka used to rule in the kingdom of Karusha. The king was so insolent that he sent a messenger and challenged Krishna to a fight. But having challenged Krishna, he went and began to live with his friend, the king of Kashi. This Krishna was not going to ignore. He came to Kasi to accept the challenge. Poundraka had with him an army that were 2 battalions, Akshauhini strong. 2 battalion strong. But Krishna decimated this army and killed Poundraka with his chakra. The king of Kasi began to fight in order to avenge his friend, but Krishna used the chakra to kill him as well. In the process, the king's head was carried into the city by a strong wind. Having disposed of the challenge, Krishna returned to Dwarka. The prince of Kashi was Sudakshina. Sudakshina saw his father's severed head and thirst for revenge. He performed a yagna and started to pray to Shiva. Shiva was satisfied with the prayers. What boon do you desire? He asked Sudakshina. Please grant me the boon that I may kill my father's murderer, replied the prince. Shiva assented. The fire of this yagna will go together with my companions, the ghosts, and do the needful, said Shiva. But take care. that the fire is not directed at the Brahmana. If it is, the consequences will be dreadful. The fire adopted the form of a demon with a trident in its hand. It then headed towards Dvaraka, but Krishna's Sudarsana Chakra repelled the fire. It drove the fire back to Kashi, where the fire consumed Sudaksina and all his priests. Samba. Samba was the son of Krishna and Jambavati. Laxmana was Duryodhana's daughter. Laxmana Swayamvara ceremony at which bride chooses her husband has been arranged, but Samba came to the assembly and abducted Laxmana. At this, the Kauravas were angered. They attacked Samba and imprisoned him. The Yadavas prepared to fight with the Kauravas, but since the Yadavas and the Kauravas had close ties, Balarama thought that he would try peaceful means first. He came to Hastinapur and requested that Samba be released. The Kauravas were in no mood to listen. They regarded the Yadavas as belonging to an inferior race, and they were certainly not going to listen to Balarama. Balarama felt insulted. He always carried a plough with him. He grasped the city of Hastinapur with his plough and prepared to hurl it into the river Ganga. The city whirled round and the Kauravas realized their mistake. They fell at Balarama's feet and begged for mercy. Samba was released and Duryodhana gave 1,200 elephants, 1,12,000 horses, 60,000 chariots, and 1,000 maids as gift. Balarama, Samba, Laxmana returned to Dvaraka. Jarasandha's death. Krishna went on a visit to Indraprastha, Yudhishthira's capital, and the Pandavas were delighted to see him. Yudhishthira told Krishna, I am thinking of performing a Rajasuya Yagna, royal sacrifice. What is your opinion? I think that's a very good idea, replied Krishna. Defeat all the kings on earth, but remember that you will not be able to complete your sacrifice until Jarasandha is killed. The Pandava brothers started out on their conquest. Sahadeva headed south, Nakula west, Arjuna north, Bhima east. After all the other kings were defeated, Bhima, Arjun, Krishna disguised themselves as Brahmanas and went to Jarasandha's kingdom. They met Jarasandha and said, We have come a long distance. Grant us our desire. Jarasandha recognized them to be Kshatriyas disguised as Brahmanas. Nevertheless, he replied, You have come to me as Brahmanas. I will grant you what you want. What is your desire? A duel. Said Bhima, Arjuna, and Krishna, Choose any one of us and fight with him. All right, replied Jarasandha, but I will not fight with Krishna. He is the coward. Threatened with my invasion, he fled from Mathura to Dwarka. Nor will I fight with Arjuna. He is younger than me and not quite strong enough. I shall fight with Bhima. The duel was arranged, and Bhima and Jarasandha began to fight with maces. The maces clashed against each other and broke into many pieces. The warriors then started to wrestle. The noise was like two mad elephants fighting for 27 days. They fought during the day and behaved as friends during the night. Bhima could not kill Jarasandha, but Krishna knew Jarasandha's history. King Brihadratha's wife had given birth to two lumps of meat and thrown them away in disgust. These were discovered by the Rakshasa demon woman named Jara. She joined the lumps together and produced a baby. Since Sandhi means uniting or putting together, the baby came to be known as Jarasandha and one who had been put together by Jara. On the 28th day of the duel, Krishna advised Bhima to grasp Jarasandha's leg in his two hands and then tear him apart, and is precisely how Bhima killed Jarasandha. Jarasandha's son Sahadeva was crowned and king of Magadha. Jarasandha had imprisoned 20,800 kings. These kings were released. Shishupala's dead. Many dead. Shishupala's dead. Many kings and sages assembled on the occasion of Yudhishthira's royal sacrifice, but ignoring everyone else, the first offering of the sacrifice was given to Krishna. This angered Shishupala. What utter nonsense, he said. Why should Krishna be given the first offering? This is like giving a cake to the crow. Everyone knows that the Yadavas are an inferior race. They are individuals assembled here who are more deserving than Krishna. The Pandavas took up their weapons to fight with Shishupala, and Shishupala too took up his weapons. But Krishna restrained the Pandavas and cut off Shishupala's head with his Sudarshana Chakra. Shalva's death. Shalva was Shishupala's friend. He resolved to kill the Yadavas and started to perform tapasya. He prayed to Shiva, and each day he ate only a fistful of dust. For an entire year, Salva prayed to Shiva. Finally, Shiva was pleased and appeared before Salva. What boon do you want? He asked Salva. Please give me a Vimana, space vehicle, and that I can fight the Yadavas with, answered Salva. Shiva instructed the Danava, demon Danava Maya, to construct such a Vimana for Salva. The Vimana was named Saubha and it was made completely of iron. Armed with this Vimana, Salva attacked Dvaraka and showered down weapons from the sky on the city. Dwarka's rampant and gardens were destroyed. Pradyumna and Salva fought a wonderful duel with all sort of divine weapons. Krishna was away at that time. When he returned, he found the battle raging. The fight was now on between Krishna and Salva. Arrows clashed against arrows, maces against maces. At long last, Krishna smashed the Vimana with his mace. He then killed Salva with his chakra. Balarama's penance. At the time of this Kurukshetra war, Balarama did not want to take sides. He preferred to remain neutral. He therefore went on a pilgrimage and came to a place Pravasa. He then arrived at the river Saraswati. After doing a circuit of several places of pilgrimage along the river, he reached the forest known as Naimisharanya. Naimisaranya. The sages had arranged for a sacrifice in the forest, and then sacrifice was to go on for 12 years. All the sages got up to honor Balarama. The only one who remained seated was Romaharsana, Vyasadeva's disciple. Balarama lost his temper at this. He killed Romaharsana. The sages exclaimed, Balarama, you have done a terrible thing. He did not get up because that was part of the sacrifice ceremony. You must perform penance. Balarama agreed. The sages first asked him to kill a demon named Balbala who was in the habit of disturbing their sacrifice. They then asked Balarama to go on a pilgrimage for the period of 1 year. Next day, Balbala arrived as was his wont, and Balarama killed the demon with a club. He then traversed the length and breadth of the country of his pilgrimage. Sri Dama. There used to be a Brahmana named Sri Dama. When young, he and Krishna had studied under the same guru and the two had been friends. Now Krishna was in Dvaraka and Sri Dama was exceedingly poor. He and his wife had no clothes to wear nor food to eat. One day Sri Dama's wife said, Krishna is your friend. He is very rich. Why don't you go to him and ask him for some help? I am sure that he will not refuse you. Why not? Thought Sridhama. At least I shall get a chance to meet Krishna after ages. But what will I take as a present for him? The Brahmana and his wife were so poor that they had no money to buy gifts. All that they could manage were 2 handfuls of fried rice. This gift the Brahmana wrapped up in a piece of cloth and left for Dvaraka. Sridhama met Krishna in Dwarka and Krishna embraced him warmly. They got to talking about old times. Krishna asked Sridhama, why have you brought me a present? The Brahmana was so ashamed of the 2 handful of fried rice that he kept quiet. But Krishna hunted out for the piece of cloth and ate the fried rice to his heart's content. Sridhama spent the night in Krishna's house and felt as if he had gone to heaven. He was given wonderful food to eat and wonderful clothes to wear, but he could not bring himself to ask anything of Krishna. Next morning he left for his own dwelling. Krishna, however, had got to know what Sridhama had wanted without Sridhama's asking for it. When the Brahmana arrived home, he discovered a beautiful temple and large gardens and ponds there. There were maids and servants. What is all this? Wondered Sridhama, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. His wife emerged wearing handsome clothes. The Brahmana and his wife realized that all this was due to Krishna's grace. They lived happily ever after. Shiva's problem. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva had power of granting boons and levying curses. Brahma and Shiva were in the habit of granting boons and levying curses, but Vishnu had never so indiscriminate. Once Shiva landed himself in a pretty mess. There was an asura named Vrika. He met the sage Narada and wanted to know who out of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva was pleased most easily. Shiva, replied the sage. Vrika went to a place of pilgrimage named Kedara and started his tapasya. First, he tried to burn parts of his body. He continued to do this for 7 days. But Shiva did not appear. He then decided to slice his head into two with an axe. Immediately Shiva appeared and restrained the Asura. What do you want? Asked Shiva. Please grant me the boon that if I put my hand on anyone's head, the person will immediately die, answered the Asura. Shiva granted the boon, but Vrika wanted to try out the boon on Shiva himself. Once Shiva was dead, he thought that he could marry Parvati. Shiva started to run in fear and the demon followed. No one knew what to do until Vishnu came to the rescue. Vishnu disguised himself and appeared before Vrika. What is the matter? He said. The Asura told the story. Shiva, exclaimed Vishnu, who believes in Shiva and his boons? They are all lies. They never come true. If you don't believe me, why don't you put your hand on your own head and see? Nothing will happen. The stupid Asura did as Vishnu and asked him to do, and of course died. Shiva was profoundly relieved. The test. The sages once wanted to find out who was supreme in the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. They sent Bhrigu to conduct an experiment. Bhrigu was also Brahma's son. He went he first went to Brahma but did not bow down before him. Brahma's anger was aroused, but since Bhrigu happened to be his son, he controlled his temper. Bhrigu next went to Kailasa to visit Shiva. Shiva got up to embrace him, but Bhrigu started to shout at Shiva. This so angered Shiva that he took up his trident to kill Bhrigu. Parvati, however, managed to calm Shiva down. Bhrigu now went to Vaikunda and discovered that Vishnu was sleeping. He kicked the sleeping Vishnu on his chest. Vishnu woke up and said, Brahmana, I am gratified that you have come to visit me. Are you well? Stay here for a while and be my guest. Your kick had freed me from all my sin. From now on, I shall bear the mark of your feet on my chest. When Bhrigu reported the result of his experiment, the sages concluded that Vishnu was the supreme god of the Trinity. The curse on the Yadavas. There was a place of pilgrimage known as Pindaraka. One day, several Yadava youth were playing there when a group of sages arrived. The youth dressed up Samba as a woman and brought him to the sages. Sages, they tell you know everything. Please tell us whether this woman will indeed give birth to a son. The sages saw through the game and were very annoyed. Stupid young man, they replied. Samba will give birth to a club, and that club will lead to the destruction of all the Yadavas. When the sages went away, the Yadavas discovered a club, Musala, inside Samba's clothing. Fearing the consequence of what they had done, they took the club home to Dvaraka and related the incident to King Ugrasena. The king ordered that the iron club should be pulverized into dust and the dust scattered into the water of the ocean. A small piece of the club did not get pulverized. This was swallowed by a fish, and the fish was later caught by a fisherman. Through him, the small piece of iron went into the possession of the hunter named Jara, who used it to fashion a head of his arrow. The remaining iron dust was brought to the beach by the waves of the ocean. There, the dust developed into reeds. Meanwhile, all sort of ill omens were witnessed. There were earthquakes, and the sun looked blurred. Krishna called the Yadavas to him and said, I do not like all these omens. Perhaps it is no longer safe to live in Dvaraka. Send the old men, women, children to Tirtha, place of pilgrimage, Sankodhara, and let all of us go to Tirtha Prabhasa. We will purify ourselves there and worship the gods. The Yadavas crossed the ocean in boats and arrived at Prabhasa. They arranged for the required sacrifices, but destiny cannot be avoided. They got to drinking a lot of wine and lost all control of their senses. They began to fight amongst themselves and kill each other with weapons. When the weapons were exhausted and the Yadavas plucked the reeds from the beach and began to fight with those in their hands, the reeds hardened into rods of iron. Thus it was that the Yadavas were destroyed. Balarama went to the source of the great ocean. He gave up his life there through yoga. The sorrowful Krishna sat under the banyan tree and meditated. Jara the hunter was searching for a deer that he might kill. Through the thick foliage, he saw Krishna's feet and thought that they were the ears of a deer. He therefore let loose an arrow, and when he came to see if his arrow had found its mark, he discovered that he had shot Krishna by mistake. Jara fell down at Krishna's feet and begged for mercy. Krishna readily pardoned him. It was after all no fault of the hunter. It had all been decreed by fate. Krishna gave up his mortal body and ascended to heaven. As soon as Krishna died, all of Dwarka, with the exception of Krishna's own dwelling, was flooded by the ocean. Gurus. Several years ago, Yadu, the ancestor of the Yadavas, met a learned young man. Where did you learn all this? He asked the young man. Who is your guru? You don't need any special guru, was the answer. Look at the earth, Prithivi. She is continually heard by the footstep of all living beings, yet she forgives them all. From the earth, one can learn the art of forgiving. Look at the air, Vayu. It fills all living beings with life but does not get attached to any of them. From the air, one can learn detachment. Look at the sky, Akasha. It is not stirred by the clouds that move across it. From the sky, the Atman can learn how not to get stirred by the senses. Look at the water, Jala. It cleans everything. From the water, one can learn the virtue of purification. Look at the fire, Agni. It adopts so many forms. One learns that, like the fire, the Paramatman, divine soul, can adopt many other forms. Look at the moon, Chandra. It seems to wax and wane, but nothing happens to it. From the moon, you can learn that nothing actually happens to the Atman. The appearance that mislead one are all illusions. Look at the sun, Surya. It evaporates the water in the summer but returns it in the monsoon. Like the sun, The learned return the gratification of the senses and do not retain them. There are many gurus like this. One can learn from several places. There does not necessarily have to be a formal teacher. The story of Brahmana. In the land of Malava, there used to be very wealthy Brahmana. He had made a lot of money from agriculture and trade. He had become addicted to material pursuits and was also a miser. He never helped any of his relatives. Eventually, the Brahmana exhausted most of his wealth and thieves stole the remainder. The Brahmana began to think about what he had done with his life and realized that he had made a mistake. Material possessions were nothing. The Brahmana therefore became a hermit. He begged food for a living. He controlled his senses and he started on a pilgrimage of the world. Thieves stole mir, whatever mir, mm, belonging, whatever mere belongings the Brahmana still had. Others stole whatever little food he had begged, but the Brahmana did not protest. He had given up all conversation. The Brahmana's attempt was successful and he obtained true knowledge. One has to be like that Brahmana if one wishes to realize the nature of the Brahman. Future dynasties and Kali Yuga. When Krishna died, the Kali era started. Parikshit had heard the story of the Bhagavata Purana from the sage Shukadeva. He now asked the sage the name of the kings who would rule in Kali Yuga. The first dynasty to rule would be the Pradyata dynasty. There would be five kings in this dynasty and they would rule for 138 years. Then the Shishunaga dynasty would take over. The 10 kings of this dynasty would rule for 360 years. A Sudra named Mahapadma or Nanda would become king next. The Nanda dynasty would rule for 100 years. Thereafter, Nanda and his 8 sons would be destroyed by a Brahmana named Chanakya, and Chanakya would make Chandragupta the king. This would be the Maurya dynasty, and the 10 kings of this dynasty would rule for 137 years. The last king of the Maurya dynasty, Brihadatra, would be killed by his general Pushyamitra. This would establish the Sunga dynasty, and the 10 kings of this dynasty would rule for more than 100 years. Then the Kanva dynasty would rule for 345 years. Next would follow 30 kings of the Andhra dynasty, which will reign for 456 years. Many other dynasties and many other kings would rule, but the country would be splintered. The kings would all be evil. Evil is a characteristic of Kali Yuga. Wealth is everything to people, and righteous living has no value. Might becomes right. Trade means cheating. In the court, the poor obtain no justice. People sport long hair. Nepotism and corruption prevail. The kings are thieves and robbers. Cows are as small as goats, and trees are as small as bushes. Famine and starvation prevail everywhere. But Kalki will arrive to put an end to Kali Yuga and establish a new Satya Yuga. He will be born in a village named Sambhala. As the son of Brahmana Vishnu Yasha. Sukadeva also informed Parikshit that 1115 years would elapse from the date of Parikshit's birth to the date of Mahapadma Nanda's coronation. The snake. You must have forgotten by now that Parikshit has been cursed that he would be bitten to death by a snake named Takshaka. Having heard the Bhagavata Purana, Parikshit worshipped Sukadeva. He told the sage that he was no longer frightened of being bitten to death by a snake. He had learned the nature of the Atman and the Brahman. When Sukadeva left, Parikshit sat down and began to meditate. Takshaka disguised himself as a Brahman in order to get near the king. He then bit the king and Parikshit died. Parikshit's son Janmejaya was furious. He resolved to perform snake sacrifice, Satpa Yajna, at which all the snakes would be killed. They would be consumed in the fire by the yajna. Takshaka fled to Indra for protection. Janmejaya finally stopped the sacrifice when Brihaspati interceded on behalf of the snakes. Virtues of Bhagavata Purana. The Bhagavata Purana is the most sacred of the Puranas. It is to other Puranas what the Ganga is to rivers, Vishnu to God, and the city of Kashi to Tirthas. Those who are devoted to Vishnu love this Purana. It is a text that should be studied, heard, and contemplated with great care. In the month of Bhadra, it should be placed on a golden throne and donated. The person who does this acquire everlasting punya. The other Puranas are appreciated only by those who do not know about the Bhagavata Purana. After having read the Purana, we bow down in obeisance before the great Lord Vishnu. Kurumjari, thank you for listening. Thank you, Kurumjari.